going on, guys? Thanks for tuning in to Brothers of Merit. Taylor.
What up?
What's up, man?
What up?
Not much. We had a really good episode tonight for you guys. We had Johnny Shelton, who's the team chaplain for the Baltimore Ravens. Fun fact, the only thing I'm going to give away is he was the first NFL chaplain ever hired full-time, which...
on staff by that team. Yeah, 100%.
Which I think that's amazing. So that's the only thing we're giving away for the interview. But obviously you guys can tell what we probably talked about, which was Ravens and sports and faith and how they're all related. And Taylor, you and I can kind of hit on that, especially with our soccer backgrounds and our bring-ups for that. It's just, I sit back now thinking of his interview because it was really good. And I just love how he touches the men of the NFL in regards to, and I think I mentioned in the interview, they come from all different walks of life.
Yeah.
From all different places in the United States or even globally. And he gets to preach to them the gospel in ways that either he or they have never received before. You know what I mean? Like, so I really enjoyed listening to him explain specifically also. I just liked hearing the details on how a Sunday morning goes in the NFL, because once I found out that there was a chaplaincy existing in the National Football League, I thought it was pretty neat to just hear what they do on Sunday mornings.
Right.
He did mention, which I'm actually, I'm not even going to say.
All right. So. No, I loved it. And I think that that's cool. And like you alluded to the point that we both have kind of like a sports background. Like we both grew up playing soccer and just being around sports. And I think that's just super relatable, like how many of our hobbies have to do with sports, right?
Yep.
And maybe not even ourselves, like how many of us have kids that are starting to get into sports. And I think that a lot of times, I'm trying to think through like how I want to word this. Like my college coach, Josh, so he's been mentioned many times on this season between me and Grant.
Yeah. Hey, Josh.
He used to say that sports, because a lot of times people say that sports like develops character. And he used to say that sports doesn't develop character. Sports gives you opportunity to expose your character, right?
Wow.
Which means, so sports is actually just filled with coaching moments, right? Where you either, your character is exposed in a positive light or a negative light. And then you can either learn from that in a good way or a bad way, right?
Yeah.
And we see that a lot in the NFL. On Sundays of guys doing it right and guys who mess up, who get in the heat of the moment, like thinking back to a couple weeks when like the Browns-Steelers game, like, you know what I mean? Like that, like there's situations where it exposes character, and I'm not saying specifically that like, Myles Garrett has a bad character or anything, like I'm not going down that path, but my point being like, that's a coaching moment, right? Like that is a coaching moment that now someone has a chance to like breathe into these guys' lives, how to like you know what I mean? Like the right thing to do here.
Right.
And how God can work through their lives and redemption and all that through those things. And Johnny Shelton's the guy who gets to do that for the Baltimore Ravens. So the fact that we got to have him on and got to hear some stories, and there's tons more stories. Like, we mentioned in the episode, like I'd love to have him on and literally just like not even talk, like just push record and just be like,
listen to him.
Just tell us stories about how you've seen God impact people's lives, because it's awesome.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. I just think that I look back, and I obviously didn't grow up with a strong faith, so I experienced athletics without it really being Christ-centered. Yeah. Whereas you were able to say it vice versa of that. You know what I mean? So when I was listening to his stories, and I would start thinking about like the FCA, and I didn't get jealous, but it just pumped me up to think that the youth these days has that opportunity. Sure. And it made me think like how cool it would have been had I have found my faith, prior in my life, how cool it would have been just to experience that. Yeah. I don't sit here and say I wish I would have or wish I would not have, because everything leads to where you are today. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I won't, I don't want to change my past or anything, but it pumped me up listening to him, because it's amazing with the work that these mentors do and these coaches do to these young athletes.
And it's, I don't know, I think we probably actually even mentioned it on Brandon Johnson's episode in season 1 about how, like, I love that, like, God loves us enough to, like, let our, like, passions, you know what I mean? Like, to be involved in the things that we're passionate about, and to, like, let sport, like I said, like, this is something that, like, is a hobby, a love, a passion. Like, I mean, I still work in sport, right? Like, soccer's still something, like, I've said since I was in, like, middle school, like, I passionately love this game. Like, there's just something about it that I love, and I love that, like, I don't know, like, that's awesome. Like, God, like, gives us the desires of our heart, and that he cares about us enough to not just be, like, confined to a church on Sunday mornings, but, like, he's a part of our lives, and we carry him with us out onto the field.
Oh, absolutely.
And things, I don't know, like, I think that's awesome that he's, like, a part of, I don't know. I don't really
he's
know
a part
how
of that's
develop that thought.
It's just another avenue to build a relationship with God. Like, that's what it is. I mean, whether it's sports, whether it's, it's going to, like, sewing or whatever, if you have a hobby, not saying that everyone sews, but that's just the first thing that came to mind. I don't sew anybody. But whatever your hobby may be, it's just, we're blessed to have that opportunity, and whatever connects you closer with God, and some people are sports. And in this case, Johnny Shelton is that pastor chaplain figure within the organization for the Baltimore Ravens to be able to provide that gospel to the players. So I just it was a really good interview, and we'll send it in. But if any of our listeners, which I know probably 90% of you are sports fans, you're definitely going to love this, because it's just going to connect you to that sports mindset, but with that faith intertwined with it. So,
and, like, not to, like, it's almost like cliffhanger, like 20 minutes in, when we asked him, like, the last question, like, for Brotherhood, like, that, like, got my heart beating.
It was tough to hit the stop button. It was like, I didn't want to end it.
Oh, shoot. We need another 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But so stick around to the very end and just get ready to get fired up. So
let's send him in.
See you on the other side.
All right. All right, Mr. Shelton, how you doing tonight, sir?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing great. Doing very well, especially after the Ravens win this past weekend. So we'll hit on that soon. But for those listening, Mr. Johnny Shelton, he is the chaplain for the Baltimore Ravens. Thanks for coming on tonight, Taylor. What's up?
What up?
Not much. We are incredibly thankful of your time, and I know the guys will get a lot out of this. So let's get right into it. Mr. Shelton, if you wouldn't mind sharing with our listeners, your testimony, your bring up, your background, and things like that.
Yes. My background, I was born in I'll just tell everybody the Midwest, because we moved around a lot. I come from a single parent home. It was me, my mom, and 3 sisters. And I was born in Chicago, but we moved around from Chicago to Memphis, Tennessee, to Missouri, several places where there were family. My mom was just trying to find stability somewhere, and finally graduated high school from Missouri. And so went on from high school. I was blessed with a football scholarship to Southeast Missouri State, and I played football there as a free safety. Did that for 4 years, and but the interesting thing with my journey goes back to just growing up in that single parent home.
Sure.
We were church goers. My mom, we've always, no matter where we moved, we were in somebody's church on Sunday. And as I look back on that, I'm very thankful for that because of the foundation. I gave my life to the Lord at the age of 12 after a week-long church camp. Gave my life to the Lord, and for what I knew at that time, it was a very awkward situation. And I say awkward because when I made that decision for Christ, I realized that I did not make that decision genuinely. And so went on and I lived my life as a Christian, thinking that I'm a Christian, but as I later find out, that I really wasn't walking with the Lord. And I found that out my junior year of college. And after so many things, family things that was going on, injuries in football, and almost death situations where it made me realize that I needed a Savior. And so it was at that point, at the age of 21, is when I really surrendered my heart to the Lord and started letting Him be Lord of my life.
That's awesome.
And so, so from a Christian standpoint, that's my testimony in a nutshell. I could literally go on for days if I went into the specifics, but that's basically my testimony in a nutshell.
That's awesome. I mean, that just means we have content to have to bring you back at another time for the rest of those stories. But that's awesome.
Absolutely.
That would be great.
So, Mr. Shelton, I got a question for you. After listening to your bring up, you said that you had 3 sisters, right?
Sure.
Yes.
So how did that look? And you said you were from a single mother home as well. So you didn't have any brothers, and you didn't mention your father. But how did you and who did you use to bounce things off of in regards to Brotherhood? Did you utilize it off sports teams because you played football, or did you have any mentors as you went through life, or because you were just surrounded by
male figure.
Females, and we're just, as we look at it from the Brotherhood standpoint?
Absolutely, and that's a great question, because that's actually a big part and a reason of what I do and why I do it. Today, that's part of my purpose, because had it not been for coaches in my life, had it not been for sports, man, I don't know where I would be.
Yeah.
It was those guys, because I had there was no brothers, there was none of that. And it was very difficult. So it was a thing that I was craving on the inside.
Yeah.
Of just that male bonding. And so when sports came along, it was something that was just refreshing. As I look back on it, as a young person, the only thing that I was concerned about was just being okay. As long as my mom was okay, we were moving a lot. I really didn't have time to really get a hold of what was going on, as difficult as it was, but I know that I was craving that brotherhood. And if it hadn't been for sports and coaches, the Boys and Girls Club, things like that, man, I wouldn't know where I would be.
I love that. That's awesome. I mean, we talk often about that's something that as men we crave, is that brotherhood, and that really just that community just in general, but that brotherhood and having, like Brandon said, other guys to bounce ideas off of and to be iron sharpening iron. Like really just at our core as men, we crave that, whether a lot of times guys want to admit that or not. So that's awesome, and I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that. That's awesome. So just to jump a little bit ahead, I guess. Now you are, like Brandon said, you're the chaplain of the Ravens. Do you mind sharing how that came to be, and just the story of how you got into doing what you're doing now?
Well, yeah, I got into chaplaincy, sports ministry, actually through ministry Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
That's awesome.
I did back in 1999 in North Carolina. I served on the board with that organization in that city in North Carolina, and and I had no plans. I was working corporate America. I had no plans to really doing anything in terms of a career. It was just something that I knew that sports was involved, and I wanted to be an asset and help out. And that's how it started, but God had other plans, for me, and things happened, and I ended up being on staff with FCA in North Carolina. And that's when the sports chaplaincy started just blowing up. It started just growing, and I thought I was going to be a pastor of a church.
Wow.
But I ended up joining staff with FCA in North Carolina, and I started off as a chaplain at Elon University in North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
And then I served 3 years there, and then I started at Virginia Tech as a chaplain there under Coach Frank Beamer.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2013, after the Ravens won the Super Bowl, I became the chaplain of the Baltimore Ravens. So I've been serving there for 7 seasons.
That's awesome.
Wow. That's amazing. And it's the cool thing is we have, obviously FCA is becoming, I mean, it already is, but it's becoming huge, and we love it because it then focuses a Christ-centered, not just lifestyle, but in sports and everything. So it teaches you a lot of good characteristics and traits for these young kids. And we have an FCA, obviously, here local where we live, and we interviewed a few months back. Taylor has a friend who is on staff for FCA here in Carroll County in Maryland. So it's just Brandon Johnson. So it's just amazing to hear how you started off in FCA, especially back in 1999. And here we are 20 years later to see what it's still doing in the lives of the youth. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's amazing. How did you like your time there with FCA and then the transition into that college lifestyle and chaplaincy?
Well, man, FCA is a phenomenal ministry.
Yeah.
I still consider myself a part of FCA because of the things that I've seen happen, how God has used that organization around the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for somebody like me who coaches, the ministry of FCA ministers to coaches and athletes. Mm-hmm. And so I think back in middle school when that coach was ministering to me, and it made the world of difference in my life. And I see how coaches are and what they need and what coaches go through. As athletes, we don't look at a coach and think that he has these other hats that he has to wear because we just see him as coach.
Right.
But they have so many other things, and so I can't say enough about that ministry. And it was an awesome time. You meet great people. And at the end of the day, though, it's about saving lives, saving souls, leading people to Christ. And that's what I love the most. And when you put sports and that together, man, it's a win-win. And so it's just a blessing to be able to come through FCA and be a part of that organization. And again, I can't say enough about it, but it's been amazing going to Virginia Tech and then now here with the Ravens because that's where it started.
That's awesome. I love that, and that's just everything you're saying about the coaching and everything like that, and being able to be that mentor and that piece in someone's life and leading them to Christ is awesome. And so you get, like you just alluded to there, you get to do that for a group of individuals. We interviewed James Hurst a couple episodes ago, for anybody who listens remembers that, from the Ravens, and he brought your name up, and he's somebody that, like, in that episode, I guess what I'm saying, in that episode, we talked about the fact that the NFL, like these guys that play in the NFL, they're people that a lot of times we look up to. We watch them all on Sunday mornings. Like, it's a group of guys that we don't all get to interact with on a daily basis. You get the privilege of not just rubbing shoulders with them, but you're there intentionally to just teach them about Jesus. So I was just wondering if you had any, I know that there's one story in particular that I guess I'll actually even lead with, but just any stories that you've had of how you've gotten to impact people in that role. Like, for example, the story that recently came out of Trace McSorley getting baptized at the facility, because that's awesome. So if you could just share it, really, it's almost just like turn over the mic and can you just share how God's been working through you in that ministry now?
Yeah, man, I tell you, it's been a straight up mind-blowing season of life, if I can say that. Because, you have guys like James Hurst that God has brought to the Ravens, and he's been here a number of years. And to see him spiritually grow, that's a story within itself.
Sure.
Because from the average fan, they look at these guys and the only things that they're thinking about is the wins and the losses. And that's all that they want. But what they neglect to look at is that these men are family men. They're husbands, they're fathers, their sons. They have a life outside of football. And to see these guys and the work that they put in on the field, but then how intentional that they are off the field in terms of their Christian walk, the ones who are believers, man, it's just amazing. And that just warms my heart even more. And so my day to day, man, every day is a story, because I meet one-on-one with these guys to help them grow spiritually, and just to see the intentionality of them, is a story. This deal with Trace was something that came about just through conversation. We talk about it. I try to explain to them, what baptism is, because we go through the process of you accepting Christ, and you go from accepting Christ, and then you just explain the process to them. And so baptism came up in just a conversation. And there was an opportunity where he wanted to be baptized. He had been baptized when he was younger, but he was kind of coerced and as a child, and he wanted to make that decision and own it for himself. And so that's how that came about. And man, and these stories are happening every single day at some capacity, whether it's baptism, whether it's giving your life to Christ, whether we're starting a one-on-one discipleship, whether you're coming to Bible study, chapel services, the couple studies that are going on that James and Amanda Hurst lead. It's just a whole array of church things that are going on to help them spiritually, and it's just a blessing and an honor to be a part of it.
It's awesome.
I love that. That is so cool, just in general, and because of like Taylor said earlier, the lives that you get to touch. NFL players come from totally different walks from across the globe. So you get to meet and preach to members that you never would have got the chance to even meet had it not been for the opportunity that you have as your career. So I think it's amazing the job that you do. Awesome. And since we're talking about the football and the Sundays and all, what does your normal Sunday look like as the team chaplain?
My normal Sunday is, it depends on what time the game is. So if most of our games start at 1:00, and so my normal time is, so we have our chapel service 4.5 hours before kickoff. So that means 8:30 is our chapel time. A lot of the NFL teams have their chapel services on Saturday nights, but we have ours on Sunday. And so 8:30 is the chapel time. So if it's an away game, I'm normally up, man. I'm always up at around 5 a.m. I'm up and getting ready, and I will go down and I will pray over the room before we start the chapel service, probably about an hour before the chapel service starts. I'm starting to pray for God's will to be done, for the hearts to bring the players that he wants there. And I'm just praying in the room. And then they will come in probably start filing in around 8:20. I'm playing worship music as they're coming in. And they just come in, man, and we invite the Lord in there with us. We spend our first 5 minutes of that service doing praise and worship, playing music, and just really worshiping the Lord. And then I'll do a message, and then we close out. It's only a 30-minute service. We'll close out. We'll go to a pregame meal, and then after that, I meet with some guys one-on-one if they're wanting to pray or talk about something that's been on their heart. And I will spend the next hour if we are home and I'm talking to guys one-on-one as they need it. And if they don't need it, then I will go over to the stadium and I'm just there basically to help guys in whatever they need. And so basically my presence, I'm just there to be seen if needed. I pray for a lot of guys, different times, and this goes all the way up until kickoff.
Wow. That's so cool because from our side, the fan side, where every Sunday or Monday night, whatever, that we're watching you don't ever get to experience or even hear those details of how your Sunday morning looks. And it wasn't up till a few years ago that I even realized that and was, I was found out that sports teams have chaplains. So I love that you're the first person to tell me how a typical Sunday looks as an NFL chaplain and how you guys do service and worship. And also, thanks for sharing that. That's really cool. And so with that, I'm going to ask another question about sports chaplaincy. How does I would say, networking work for NFL chaplains? Like, do you guys have like retreats that you have to go on? Does each team have a chaplain, or some teams utilize one from a different team? Do you meet up for training every year? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. No, but we do have a network. The main chaplaincy, so every team has access to a chaplain. Most all 32 teams have access. And what I mean by access is that there's a chaplain for that team in some capacity. So you have your parachurch ministries, Athletes in Action, then you have FCA, of course. And so they have guys in the cities of the NFL cities who's on staff with AIA. Most of the teams in the NFL is AIA. A lot of them on the college level is FCA. And so they have access through those organizations where those guys will come in, but it's really based on the team and how the coaches and the GMs, how much access a chaplain can have. And so with the Ravens, me being literally on staff with the Ravens, that happened when I first got here, where the Ravens was the first team to hire a full-time chaplain on staff, where they wanted him in the building 24 hours a day. And so my job is a little different than a chaplain at a team where they just have access to the facilities, but they're not on staff.
I love that.
But to answer your question though, Athletes in Action, they have a guy there. His name is Corwin Anthony, who's in charge of the pro ministry, and he is the one who coordinates the chaplains trainings from across the league. And we do meet up twice a year, and we do our chaplains training. And so we do network. We stay in touch with each other. When a player comes to our team that was with another team, we stay in contact with the player, especially if he's a believer and he's plugged in, and we just want to love on him and make that transition for him as easy as possible. So we stay connected that way as well.
Wow. That's awesome. And I was actually going to say something to the effect of, that's awesome. And like hearing about Sundays and like how you get to pour into the guys on Sunday morning and like in a typical, like almost church setting is awesome. And it's almost like easy to be like, oh, that's so cool. Like church is happening. But like, I think what's really cool is that you're developing these relationships with these guys and you're like earning that right for them to want to come on Sunday morning, and you're having one-on-one conversations and you're developing relationships with these guys, which is how Jesus, exactly how Jesus did it and exactly how Jesus wired us to be, is just to be in community. So like the fact that you say that the Ravens brought you on staff, I think like realizing like, hey, it's cool to have someone here on Sunday mornings and do that, but like really investing in these guys' lives is what's going to make an actual difference for them. So that's awesome. I think that's super cool. Like you get to just be, you get to like just be Jesus and have community with people all day.
Right.
And that's awesome. I love it.
I love how especially being a Ravens fan, the Ravens were the first team in the NFL to hire a full-time chaplain on staff. Like I think when you told me that, I'm like I lit up because I think that's amazing because I bleed purple anyway. So to hear that, that's really cool. Has that set a trend anywhere across the NFL? Like, have any other teams that you know of hired full-time staff chaplains like yourself since?
Yes. There's 4 other teams. No, 3 other teams. So it's 4 total teams that has a full-time chaplain with them, and it's us, it's Buffalo Bills, the New England Patriots, and the Denver Broncos.
Okay, so how are you gonna be this weekend coming up playing the Bills? Will you meet with the other chaplain when you play them?
Yeah. We meet before the game. You know, we'll touch base and we'll meet up before the game and get caught up with one another, and it's just like anything else. The relationship that we develop with certain ones is stronger than others, and so the particular chaplain in Buffalo, I'm really, really close to him. I love him to death. So we'll get together, man, and we'll pray before the game, get caught up, and then of course we meet after the game and pray. You know, whether you win or lose, and we just go and we lift these guys up in prayer.
Wow,
that's awesome. Like I said, I could sit here and talk like all day about just the intentionality and the relationships and just hearing stories. I love it. I'm gonna give it to Brandon to wrap it up here just for time's sake, but I love it.
Yeah, so Mr. Shelton, so typically how we end it here is we always end with the same question. It sometimes branches off into other things, but usually we like to hear what is your, and I'm extremely excited, by the way, to hear your aspect on this because of what you said in your testimony and what you do for a living. But what is your advice on brotherhood? Like for our listeners, what could you give them to walk away with? Specifically, since what you grew up with, was surrounded by sisters, so you had to rely on coaches and mentors, and now you've taken that, flipped that role, and now you have become that model for other men coming up. What could you give our listeners?
Well, man, the biggest thing that jumps out at me is, I think about the scripture in Genesis where it says, man is not meant to be alone. And that thing right there resonates with me all the time because it's so true. The biggest thing that the biggest trap that the enemy wants for men is us to isolate ourselves. And so brotherhood, true brotherhood, is based on relationships, and it's based on being vulnerable. But those are the things, as I said earlier in the podcast, we crave relationships, but as men, somehow, we don't really understand what that really means. And so what I would encourage your listeners is to really, really think about the things that you are craving when it's time to meet someone, when it's time to, God will open a door for us to be in relationship with someone, with another brother. And I would say, get uncomfortable. I mean, get uncomfortable because it's really uncomfortable, but you got to get used to being uncomfortable when it comes to relationships, because brotherhood is a key component of growth. And we cannot grow alone. And so that's what I would encourage your listeners, is to just really understand that God put people here on earth for us. And we need to take advantage of the resources and the people that he entrusts to us. And so that's why brotherhood to me is so important.
I love it. I mean, that advice is worth the price of admission right there. Like that.
That's what we stand for. That's what this ministry is about, is bringing men to become uncomfortable. You have to become uncomfortable to get comfortable. And it's funny because some of the words that you were using when you were saying that, Taylor and I looked at each other like, man, we've had this conversation before, and we've used that exact terminology to explain how we were feeling and what we thought.
It fires me up, man. I love it.
I mean, that's awesome, because I've learned that I have 3 people in my life, 3 mentors that's in my life, right now that I speak to every week. every week. Two of them has been my long. They have been, I mean, for literally 25 years, and the other one is here local. I had to find one local, and reach out and actually meet personally with him once a week, and that's how important that is to me.
Yeah.
Because we can't do it ourselves. We need to. And I call him a cornerman. I call those guys my cornermen, and it's a boxing analogy that I use often, because in a boxing match, when you have those people in your corner, you got your cut man, you got your man that's giving you water, you have the trainer that's giving you instructions, and they do that in the middle of a round. But after a while, the buzzer sounds, you stand up, they take the chair away from you, and then they push you back in the middle of the ring to do battle. That's the way life is, and that's what brotherhood is. We need men that's going to be our cut man, that's going to give us instructions, that's going to rub our shoulders when we're crying, and then they're going to push us back out because we have to go and serve.
I love that so much. I literally just want to be like, and continue.
Keep going.
It fires me up. And actually, just real quick, last question. I know that we said we were going to be done, but last question. You said that it was important to you to be intentional and find a local mentor that you like actually meet with at face to face. What's like the process that you go through to when you go to find that? Like, you know that that's intentional. You're coming to Baltimore. What was the process like when you went to go find someone local?
Well, first of all, you have to wait, and you have to see who God has placed around you. A lot of times the person that needs to be in our corner, he already has placed them around you. It's just that we, either me or that person, doesn't verbally open their mouth to talk about it. Again, that's that uncomfortable thing again that we have to look at and point at. But most of the time, you just got to wait, and you got to be obedient and pray about that, to where it's very clear that the person, because most of the time, 9 out of 10, the people are already there. So, for instance, in my case, I came to Baltimore, my wife and I didn't know anyone, other than the people with us in the Ravens organization. So I had to be patient, number one, and to really since the Lord being involved in that, to show me who those people are, or even those candidates are. But most of the time, they're right there. And so really, it's just the patience, man, and to really get out of your comfort zone and to be intentional, because the Bible says, you have not because you ask not. And you have to get out that comfort zone and ask men. Be like, especially if it's a man that you look up to, a man that you like, man, I like the things that he's doing, and I want that. You have to open your mouth and say, hey, bro, can we meet? You have to get out. You have to get out of that comfort zone if you know that is the guy. Invite him out to lunch, and let's talk. Let's see what happens from there. But you have to ask, especially if it's a guy that you're wanting to learn from.
That's so good.
That's money. That is exactly what men need to be hearing. Thank you, Mr. Shelton, so much for just coming onto the show and giving us your time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I know Taylor did.
Absolutely.
And I would, if it weren't for time, I would sit here and just let you keep, just preaching into us, because this was amazing. So
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Hey, man, you're more than welcome. And again, like you mentioned earlier, maybe we can do a part 2 sometime.
Absolutely.
There you have it, guys. That was our interview with Johnny Shelton, the chaplain for the Baltimore Ravens. As I said at the beginning, I hope you guys liked the kind of spotlight look inside the chaplaincy of the Baltimore Ravens and what they do. You've heard me say it twice now. I just can't get over how cool it is that they have, sermons on Sunday mornings, and they preach to them before the games, and he prays with them. And we talked about the baptism. That's he doesn't just preach to these guys on Sunday mornings. He becomes a integral part of these guys' lives. He baptizes people. He has small groups with them. He mentors. Like, it's such a cool role to know that in a professional organization like the Baltimore Ravens, especially when, I said it before, you got guys coming from everywhere, people that have been exposed to finances and money that they've never been to in their lives, emotions that they've never been exposed to because they're on that platform now. He's there to walk them through that and guide them in their faith. So I love everything that this man is about.
Absolutely. And like he mentioned, like you just said, like he mentioned that Trace McSorley where he baptized that guy. That guy, current backup quarterback.
Right.
And I think we talked to him off the air. He mentioned like just the intentionality that like that shows in Trace's life. And off the air, we talked a little bit more about that story about how that's the first ever baptism he's done at the facility.
Yep.
He's done baptisms with the team before. Like God is working in these guys' lives, which is awesome. Yep. But Trace was like, no, I want to do this right now. Which is awesome. And I don't know, it's just really, really cool. And the fact that he gets that, like, just to be Jesus. And he is everything we talked about last week with Brendan's episode of evangelism. Like, he is going out to all nations, making disciples.
Absolutely.
And he just happens to be able to do that in an NFL locker room.
Yep.
I love it.
And it is America's sport. You know, it's the biggest platformed sport in this nation. And it's just the people that, and I'm sure if he had the opportunity to do it with fans, like he would as well. Like he was a really genuine guy. Awesome interview. So
heck yeah.
I hope you
should
guys
be fired.
it.
Yeah, I was gonna say you should be fired up right now based on like I know I am.
Yeah, it was good. I know you guys liked the end because it really started to get heavy. Like when we dropped that advice on Brotherhood, from there on out, when he started talking about having that cornerman, like that's it. Like that is what we're about, and that's what this Brotherhood. I mean, just that's it, man. So, so we have some cool stuff coming ahead, guys. So the season's coming to an end, December 29th, I believe. It's the last Sunday of December. Will be our last episode for season 2, and then we'll be back to TBD, to be determined, probably in like beginning of March-ish area. So 2 months off.
Same as last time. It's like the cadence that we have, and then we have plans.
We can do
it. I say you do it. Let's do it.
Really?
Yeah, do it.
Okay, so we are.
After all that stuff before we hit.
I know. Now Taylor's put me on the spot to say this.
That's a Christmas present.
Yeah, it is. So we are going to be releasing a YouTube series for each season. So this past weekend, if you followed us on Instagram, as I always say, and I always will, Taylor does an excellent job with that, and he lets you guys take an inside look at the recording of it in a way. So we got that recorded by his buddy Mitch, and he is a professional videographer and photographer. And shout out to Mitch. We'll post this stuff, and you guys can follow him. And
House Films, at
Films.com.
Films. We'll tag all that stuff.
Yep, but he did an amazing job, and I can't wait for it to get out. But we'll give you more details on it in the next few weeks, so you can kind of get pumped up for the off season, so you don't think you're gonna lose your Brothers of Merit fire, but because it's the off season.
Right. No, and I love it. The background there is before we started, we were like, should we do it? Should we do it? Nah, we shouldn't do it. Brandon was like, I really want to do it, and then, as always happens, we decided after we hit record. Why plan anything?
It's such typical Taylor. I don't even know why I thought of it. Yeah, that wasn't staged at all, guys.
I didn't plan it.
But you're gonna love it.
No,
seriously.
yeah.
It's got a lot of great content. We're gonna have our own YouTube channel. So just stay tuned. Next week, maybe we'll give you a little bit more insights, and then we'll keep it going. So that way,
that's the cadence. That's what I was actually about to say right there before I got taken off. That's the cadence. There is we'll do a season, and then we're gonna take some time off. And while we're taking that time off, we're gonna create that YouTube series, and then we'll do another season, and then a YouTube series, and just continue to kind of go from there. So that's kind of the cadence that we've kind of prayerfully and thoughtfully thought through, and that's kind of what to expect from here on out, now that we're a little bit more established and down the road here.
Yeah, I like it, man. And if people don't listen to the outro, they won't even hear it, so it'll still be a surprise to them. So,
there you go.
All right, guys. Well, once again, thanks for checking into us, and we will see you next Sunday.
See ya.
See ya.